School of Calisthenics boys, big up. How's it going?
We're doing good. We this is a real nice little get together actually, because getting to this point has been like James has actually been a part of our journey right from the start of calisthenics, pretty much.
Fairly instrumental.
Yeah, in shaping it. Actually,
First meeting. What's calisthenics?
well, you don't underestimate that statement actually, because when we first met, I remember I had a conversation we had at a mutual friends barbecue in the back garden.
Yeah.
And at that point, we were originally starting to think about, we're going to put ebooks out. That was what we were going to do.
I think I told you to give it all away for free.
We were starting to have a conversation about whether we were going to copyright it, protect it, and you were like, why would you want to do that? Just make it accessible to anybody.
I remember that we going, why would you want to protect it? What would be the problem if someone shared it to like thousands of people? And I remember thinking like, yeah, what is that? What, that'd be amazing.
He's onto something.
I was also mesmerised by Mitch.
Well, obviously.
Different level of energy guy.
But this was the first workshop that Jacko and I had ever really run properly. Like we have a mutual friend, Martin Yellen, and he'd invited us down. He says, got a group of guys, want to get together, want to hang out, do some calisthenics. You guys come down, we'll go outside and you can teach us some stuff. And then...
and I'm trying to think how...
That was
where had we got to at that point?
I don't know that we'd put an ebook out at that point. That was early.
We'd maybe ran a workshop in Nottingham, but maybe nothing.
So when was this? About 4 years ago?
Yeah, because it was under the header of 271. So it was before.
Oh,
it was our original sort of like
it was
little
before,
branding. It was before School of Calisthenics was launched. So I think it would have been the summer of 2015 potentially, before we'd really kind of launched. And then we reconnected at Carl Paoli's Insider.
Last
year.
Last year.
Yeah.
Well, summer of 2015 is when we went on the first trip to LA. That began the first issue.
And it was
when we met Carl
Paoli.
Yeah, yeah. I remember seeing your magazine for the first time around.
Carl Paoli's like the movement version of Kevin Bacon.
Have you said that to him?
No, but I'm gonna now.
But when I saw your first issue, I was like, boys, you got Carl Paoli in. Like that was a decent scout for the first issue.
Yeah, we had no idea. I just saw his book and I was like, we need to... Or I bought the book.
You saw his book, I had no idea who he was.
Yeah. Well, at that point, you didn't even know we were doing a magazine.
No. Movement.
And then I saw his book. It just seemed really relevant, I think, where we'd come from... Well, I'd come from at that point, so I was running. Then I found CrossFit. And that was kind of the point I met you guys. And it just seemed really like, there's way more to... I think all of this, just sports seemed a really old thing. It was like, I felt like no one's going to be doing sports soon.
Yeah, CrossFit changed that.
Everyone's going to be doing something else. Like, why do I want to compete with someone else or against someone when I could be doing it with them and making myself better in the process, and they're becoming better, so we're all becoming better. Yeah, it just kind of changed.
When did you guys start weMove in its sort of the format? I know it's evolving now, you can touch on that, but when did you guys start to get together and go...
About a week after James met you.
I think it was going to be a clothing, so my background was clothing. Like I said, I was, calendar wise, so prior to weMove, I was running a clothing business and I burnt out, but at the tail end of that, I was running a lot, got really into running and making clothes. I'm like, I can make sportswear. This is kind of really easy. Fell out of love with the business that I was doing. Just kind of overtrained, I think, then that cropped up to be quite a symptom or a pattern that I would do with everything. Just like full power, blow up, drift off. Yeah. Did that with climbing, did that with business. And I was like, we need to do something else, but clothes are a really easy way of doing it, but it just didn't seem the right thing to do. Like, can't compete with Nike, you need something to say. And I was like, we need to kind of inspire people just to move, because that was the sort of the savior of my health at the time, because I was just like, brain was gone, body was gone, like nothing was connected together. But I didn't know what to do. And I always prided myself on never being an expert in anything, which allowed me to then speak to experts and there to be no ego clash. So I was like, oh, movement, I kind of love this. If I'm just really enthusiastic around someone, and I'm like, tell me everything that you know and we'll just put it out. And I was like, so a magazine's quite a good way of doing that, because everyone wants to share their story. And this was I think podcasts they were around, but they weren't really around 4 or 5 years ago. And a magazine, it seemed like the thing that I could make. I thought a physical thing was really good to make. And then Chris and I met, and we both kind of had a similar experience of burning out, sport in our own way. Chris football and triathlon, me climbing and then running, and we kind of met, and it's like, oh, a magazine's quite a good way of putting something out where I'm not a coach, and it would be really disingenuous of me to go and try and be that, because I think that's a real skill set, and I'm much better being told what to do. It's like, okay, just tell me. You know, when we train, Chris will go, how many sets are we doing? And I'm like, 5. And I'll be like, oh shit, I shouldn't have said that, because now I've got to do 5. And Chris is like, I don't really want to do 5, but you said 5, so we've got to do 5. So we've kind of worked like that, and then that moves it forward. So a magazine came out in that way, and it was going to be clothes, but a magazine just seemed like the way to connect with loads of people. And then I thought, if we just have a really great network, we just have a great phone book. And I was like obsessed with like, oh, I could have a really amazing like contacts book that I can connect all these dots together, not really knowing where it was going, but my interest was so disparate, because I was seeing an osteopath, and then an NLP coach, and then it got into CrossFit, then I went to Olympic lifting, then I went to yoga, and it's like that, none of that makes sense, but it all made sense to me at the time, because it's like Olympic lifting, it's like use your feet, and I was like, I don't know what they are. So it's like, okay, what allows me to use my feet? Yoga, grounding, and then that had a benefit of that. And yeah, then it just went on this magical mystery tour. But I was just like, I don't want to be any one thing, which weirds people out, because sport is, well, you're a runner. I was like, I can run, but I'm not, you know, and I have a body that's kind of shaped for running, but I'm not a runner, but I can climb, but never doing that thing, because we're told that you should crush it, and you should do one thing, you should do it really well, and you're like, the only thing that's getting crushed is me.
Yeah.
And I think you were a similar thing, probably.
I think a lot of people will relate to that, particularly in our audience, that sort of like going, like doing a lot of sport and different things, and probably honing on one thing when we're younger, like you said, football or whatever, and then life takes over, and then we get into working life, and then we burn out, and then we come back to some of the things that maybe we actually really liked as a kid. And I know for me, I did one thing like rugby really, and then I'd have loved to have done things like breakdancing, a martial art, gymnastics, for just some variety, but I didn't have the freedom to. And I think now then, like, that's where what we're doing with calisthenics, then it's like going back to that now of doing something completely different. And like you said, I think like having that variety is, I think there's a lot of people searching for stuff like that with their training and whatnot. And
what I think of with rugby though is how good jiu-jitsu would be for rugby.
Totally.
And you're like, oh wow, no one's doing, you know, you're essentially in a scrum the whole time.
Yeah, why more sports? They do little bits, but why they don't actually cross-share and cross-collaborate with like coaching, practicing things they do, because there'll be tens of or hundreds of sports that could all like learn together. And I think that's one of the things that's nice about what you guys do with weMove is bringing together. Like it might, like you say, I think people don't think it makes sense, all these random things, but actually like they're all about you exploring how to do various different things with your body, and some of it's probably physical, some of it's mental, some of it's a bit of both. And for it not being about you, but actually being about the network of people, allows you to get this massive diversity of things of like, because who was you had Carl, Wim Hof.
First one, Wim, Carl,
Ron Kauk.
Story about you guys going a long bike ride.
Sachiyama, climber.
Yeah, he was a climber. Yeah, it was funny when we met him, because that was 2015.
Yeah.
So his focus was on 2020. Obviously, he's a awesome climber. He's Japanese, and it's like, whoa, this is a big honor, and that Japanese honor kind of thing. Yeah. He's like, but I've got to change my style. And we were there. His manager was opposite, and we were like, if you don't want to do it, just don't do it. Just don't bother. And his manager was like, oh, sponsorship deals. And we're going, it's not about competition. You just don't need to. If you don't want to compete, you just climb rocks, man. And you could see her just like in the really, amazingly Japanese way, just kind of being really polite, but like
the Olympics. It's in the Olympics.
Thank you, but fuck off.
And
we had surfing in there, basketball, water. The importance of water, Ayurvedic medicine. It's quite an array of subjects, really. But but as life is an array, it's not just one thing. Whether you do calisthenics or or football or whatever else, it's like.
I think what we found is that when you meet the people at the top end of what they're doing, they're drawing on such diverse things. They've just happened to have found themselves in tennis. Like Djokovic is an amazing skier. He could have gone that way. He could have probably gone to football. He could have probably gone into cross. He could have probably gone into all of these things. He just chose tennis. Yeah. And you're like, wow, but he's still dancing. Like Lomachenko, it's an amazing. Was he ballroom dancer? Or and you're like, they don't make sense.
Bruce Lee,
Cha-cha, wasn't he?
He was a ballroom dancing champion, wasn't he?
The flip side of that is always quite interesting, though, because you say, well, we've got these amazing athletes who have achieved an elite status within their sport, and they've got pedigree in tennis or whatever it might be. But what about all those people that are just good movers who never actually found what it was that they were potentially destined to be very good at? Like, I was never going to be a good rugby player, but I was a good athlete as a kid. I could probably be average at a number of different sports. But because I put my heart and soul into rugby, it was everything I wanted to do. At 68, 70 kilos at sort of 18, 19 years old.
Wet through.
Probably wasn't going to be... And my body kind of tells the stories of what that was like, of getting just absolutely hammered by dudes at 100 kilos. But had it have been hockey, could it have been something else? But I never gave myself the opportunity. But the thing that I love about what you guys have done is you've made it about movement, and the purpose is about movement and connecting all styles and forms of movement, and not being a generalist, but also if you want to be a specialist, that's cool, but also just appreciate the value of generalism as well, because like we go down the route of going, I actually really enjoy calisthenics, it ticks a lot of boxes for me, but I understand as well that how that might fit into some tricking or acrobatics, and I still want to move well. It's all connected, but you just kind of have those areas where you go, actually just want to spend more of my time. Like you guys have done a lot on, like James, you've done a lot on yoga recently. What's your training look like, Chris? Like,
yeah, my training is very general actually. Yoga, body weight, running,
breathing,
climbing,
different forms of movement.
I mean, I'm purely interested in generalism.
Yeah,
and like going back to what you were saying, I would where my head is at the moment. I'm talking, or I'm having a lot of conversations about outcome versus process, and outcome just being the result of a process. And I think if we could take out the mind out of movement and take out like money and professionalism and being like, I want to be a professional tennis player, or I want to be a professional rugby player because I want to earn my living from that. I think people would be a lot more at peace with just doing what they wanted to do. But for example, I've got an 8-year-old nephew who played against Chelsea this week for Leicester, and it's like he only wants to now be a professional footballer. And he fortunately for kids now, they live in the era where it's like, okay, well, you go swimming on Tuesday nights and then you play football on Wednesday, and he'd probably happily do that. But now that this is what he wants to be when he grows up, then you then take the generalism out and you create the specialization, right? And that's fine, and I lived that particularly with reference to football. But now it's just, I got to 25 and my body was broken from too many injuries, and now I'm in my late 30s, fixing all those things. And now I just find great pleasure in like, okay, yeah, I'm going to do yoga this morning, but actually I want to be able to climb, and I can't climb if I just do yoga. I don't have the pulling strength, and I want to go down to the park or I want to go to the CrossFit gym and do some deadlifts just because I want to lift some heavy shit. And express myself in that way. And so I kind of now, we go to, well, we don't go up a lot, but we go into the mountains a bunch, and it's like I want to run around the mountains and and scramble, and if we need to climb and do that, I just don't see why personally, I don't see why you wouldn't want to be a generalist.
Can
and
you
be able to do all these amazing things rather than being like, I can just hit a tennis ball.
But do you think that comes from having to have experience? Like, we're all of a similar sort of age. Does that come from a place of I have to have some experience and context of being a specialist? Like, I think it's very difficult to understand generalism as a kid. Like we've both got kids, James. If you take my 2-year-old, like, how do I... Yes, you want him to be a generalist, but inevitably there's going to come a point where he's like, I really get excited when I do that thing. And he's got to go through that. Yours was football to come out of it, or not, do you think?
Well, my opinion would be, having spent time with Erwan Lacour and having spent time with Tony Riddle, both natural movement athletes, natural movement, their worlds are both based in natural movement. When you see them with their kids, there is no kind of like, this is what we do. The adults, the parents, them, just kind of move around and do whatever they do, and then the kids follow. Most parents can't do that. Like, most parents just don't have the ability to get on a football field and then take the kids running and then, go swimming with them and then, balance on trees or climb trees. They just don't have it. And it, at that age, it's really a monkey see, monkey do, that age being, I don't know, a wild guess at like under 10 or something. So I think, I was always able to pick up sports really, really easy, but I would suggest it's probably because I had the neurological connections of, doing a paper route, so always being on a bike. So 20 years later, I was able to pick up triathlon pretty quickly because I was also a runner because I played lots of football. And then climbing now, it's like, okay, I'm not that great, but it's like I was forever climbing trees. Do you know what I mean? It's from a young age, we can't. I would suggest that from a young age now, because of the adult population, most kids specialise because their parents can't actually take them out and move.
Yeah, I would add to that I think when you specialise, because you mentioned potential as well, I think when you see the people at the top of their specialisation is just where their potential is, because there's a huge difference. I always use tennis because that's what I grew up playing. Between the gap between the top 3 in the world and everyone else is like, it's a country mile. They're just doing what they do.
Yeah.
Everyone else is trying to keep up, and I would kind of go, you're great, but you're not achieving your potential. Those 3 are. They've just found that it's just channeled into that thing. And I think the challenge is they've specialised so much, whereas the top 3, they're in their potential. They're just living that thing. They have the mindset and the focus, and you could transfer that to...
I wonder whether, like, always when it comes back around a little bit to what Tim was saying something earlier, and it made me think of, is there, like, for Tim as an example, and he said he was never going to be like that great at rugby, is he world class at something? That thing just doesn't actually exist, or isn't a game, or isn't a sport, or isn't an Olympic thing. It's just, I think that it's fast. Like, it's, my mind is like now just going crazy.
Yeah, well, I think we are. I think we each have an ability to be. Well, anyone that becomes number one, they've kind of ventured into new territory, and that's exactly what.
But it's still within the parameters of something that we can measure everyone else by. So, like I was thinking about with the generalisation versus specialism, there comes a point where, just like you were talking about, that the whole reason why wouldn't you want to go and explore all these different things, that I don't know if all of us or a lot of us, most of us there's something in us that wants to go out and explore and do stuff because we feel good when we are exploring either ourselves or the world or doing some stuff. And there's that driving in us, but then there's also a competitiveness in us that as soon as we start getting good at or finding something that we like Tim said, when your kid goes, right, I absolutely flipping love this, part of that will be that they're probably good at it. We often don't love things that we're rubbish at. Yeah. And then all of a sudden it's then like, how do I then rank above everybody else or compared to other people? How am I actually doing at this? And then it's a case of there needs to be some parameters, and then we're then finding out how good we are compared to other people at various things. It's actually, I don't know, it then makes it takes away some of that. If you want to then actually be good, you have to get rid of some of the generalisation, and you have to then specialise.
I think that works if you continue to love it.
Yeah.
And then you can operate in that zone, because if if you just like, I just don't really enjoy doing this,
Yeah.
you know. And I will always say Andy Murray. I mean, phenomenal tennis player, but always looked hard work. Federer always looked effortless. They both had huge tempers. Federer had a massive, you know, and just found a way to turn it round. It's, you know, it's grooved. Like, it's just...
I admire Murray. I can appreciate both. I admire Murray more because of exactly what you said. It looks flipping hard work. Like, he ground everything out of his body. Well, he's probably
ground his hips out.
Paying for it now, but like, rather than it necessarily coming easy.
Yeah,
to
but
him.
I don't think it did come easy. It's like effortless effort. When we were talking about climbing, it's just like, oh, you know, or seeing someone do a planche or whatever it is. It's like, I want that. Do you want to be able to do a planche, or do you want to be able to express your body in a way that looks effortless?
Yeah.
We had a couple of good perspectives, or we had one good perspective and then viewed another perspective on competition. One was with, what's Yummie's second name?
Tikkanen.
Yummie Tikkanen, do you know him?
I think I've met him.
He's the strength and conditioning coach.
He's the CrossFit coach for
I met him in
Annie
National Circus.
Yeah, okay.
He talks about competition with regards to, you know, you use it as a method to progress yourself. Like, you almost remove the ego, I want to be better than that person, or the ego perspective, I want to be better than that person, and apply, I can use that person as a way to make myself better.
Yeah, to see where you are on that day at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the second one was Laird Hamilton, the big wave surfer, who has never pursued competition, is arguably one of the most, not even arguably, he's one of the most famous surfers in the world. But by removing himself from that, and actually, there's a lot of stories of different surfers where the competition just completely ruined surfing for them, and it didn't allow them to express what they wanted to express and how they wanted to express. And by removing the competition element, they were able to go on and achieve really great things because they weren't confined within the barriers or the boundaries of this is how you have to do it. Like, you can't pull that trick because that doesn't work in this competition. So they were able to then go off on their own, and you know, it's only in a world, if you're driven by, you know, wanting to make financial success or, you know, have those trappings, does it become a hurdle for you to achieve great things. But if those things aren't your concern, then you can just go away and like, okay, I'm going to hit the surf for 10 hours a day and, like, you know, really develop my craft for the sake of mastery, you know, first and foremost. And then if anyone else watches me do it, then fine. And I personally, I would say that's the perspective you should pursue anything with. It's always for the mastery of the craft. If you're so inclined to want to pursue one thing, whether it be football or handstands or surfing or whatever else, or, you know, or painting, or, you know.
I think that comes down to having a certain level of, like you say, it's passion that drives that. And I think you see that a lot in freestyle sports. We were talking about this a bit earlier about there was a real kickback when the Olympics is. I mean, I think Olympics and what they've done, particularly with the Winter Olympics, and it's now coming into summer sports. They revolutionised what had become a fairly tired and outdated competition by bringing urban sports, if you want to call them that, freestyle snowboarding, freestyle skiing, taking what the X Games and everything that was good about the X Games and bringing that into Olympic sport has reinvented that whole kind of culture around what the Olympics means and who wants to be involved in it. But there was a point to start off with where the Olympics is just not cool. Like, I don't want to have a gold medal. I don't ride so that you guys can tell me if I'm good or not. It was, I ride because I want to go out with my mates. And I've spoken to a few people that work in performance snowboarding and freestyle, and that culture of how they get athletes to get into the performance pathway, if we want to call it that. It's a completely different approach from what we do when we've got a swimmer who's 12 years old and we say, you need to specialise. You've got to start doing 20 hours a week training if you're going to be a good swimmer and reach your potential. And that might be a national age group swimmer. It could be on a GB team. But the guys, I think there's something that's so different, and why we see so many people drop out of sport at a certain age where they've specialised early is some of the things that we talk about in terms of freedom of movement, freedom of expression. Do what you want to do, because move how it makes you move in a way that makes you feel happy, move in a way that makes you excited and exhilarated. That's passion, and that's without the constraints of move like this because that's what you've got to do to win a gold medal. And I think the two things are completely different. And that's what I think is interesting about when you talk about big wave surfers. Why do you want to ride big waves? Why don't you want to be like the best competitive surfer in the world? Because riding big waves just makes me happy, probably. It gives me an excitement that I'm just not going to get from competing. I don't care about competition. But I think that comes from a great degree of self-awareness. Like, and maybe it's subconscious, maybe I don't know, unconscious or conscious, maybe not. But it's knowing yourself and being comfortable with that, and a culture where you don't have to be the best because you're on top of a podium. He is one of the best, like, big wave surfers the world has ever seen, but he doesn't do it.
I think this is where you're touching on a really important point. We are starting to come across with a greater frequency, is that the movement expression is purely a way to learn about yourself. So the most recent one we had was with a climber called Ron Kalk in Yosemite recently. Absolute legends, pioneered a lot of the routes in Yosemite, and he's just kind of regarded as one of the greatest climbers the world's ever seen, I suppose.
Of his generation.
Of his generation.
So he uses his legs or just his arms?
He was made. He was
he's
good
so
with his
good he
legs,
just slicks up like
but
a
he
snake.
did do 100 pull-ups a day.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Strong.
As a teenager, yeah. And he talks about how he would climb these new routes that would take him X amount of time, and then the importance of taking time away from it to work out what it was that he learned about himself. And I think that's when the all movement is art, but that's when it takes on this deeper meaning where it can actually give you something more than like a notch on the bedpost of I rode that wave, or I climbed that thing, or I got my muscle up, or whatever else.
But we have to fight for that in performance sports. So some of the stuff that we do with the athletes that we've worked with, and particularly it's prevalent in swimming, which is a sport we've done a lot in, post-race reflections. It got to the point where there is a designated point in the prep area at a competition where swimmers go after a race by themselves and they record a reflection. So we're putting that habit in. So, okay, what do you learn from that race straight away? And then, there's probably going to be a debrief further down the line and video analysis you can look at, but straight off the cuff. But we've got young swimmers. So a lot of the other guys, particularly in Paralympic sport, can be 14 to 17 maybe. So they haven't have a level of maturity of someone like who's just been in the surf for 20 years, and all of a sudden you kind of, it's different conversation. But it's also, the difference again is that in structured sport and specialised sport, especially where early specialisation is a thing, like in gymnastics, you get told what to do from day one. That is what you've got to do. And we saw Jeremy Shepherd speak at the UKSCA conference a couple of years ago, and I'll never forget what he was talking about. He was the strength and conditioning coach for the Australian surf team, I think, on the world tour. He's now with the snowboarding team in Canada. But he's done a lot of research, good academic, and he was like, he would look at sports like diving and go, it's a square sport, boring. Because I already know what you're going to do. There's nothing exciting about cricket, and you can argue with him. But he's like, if you're in a snowboard half-pipe event, if you've got a trick planned and the guy in front of you goes half a rotation bigger, you're at the top going, okay, got a decision to make now, because there's no rules. No one said you've got to do it this way to score that. That's what we're expecting. And I really thought that was interesting. So my reflection on that in terms of creating an environment for someone to develop movement skills, movement literacy, enjoy movement and become a mover for life, is that there is a role for specialism. I want Jack to experience some of that structure and going, this is how you're going to work towards a specific target. So that might be gymnastics, it could be diving, it could be anything. But I also want him to have exposure to freestyle sports. Go out on a wakeboard and do whatever you want to do. Move in a way that makes you feel good, because I think there's value in both. Like we came from a structured sport, and rugby made me, from a coaching perspective as well, it gave me so many skills of understanding parameters. We called the ref sir from day one because that was what it was. You could never turn around and give a torrent of abuse at the referee, and there's a respect within that. And there are these good things, but I think having that and encouraging the reflection, and I feel really, I'm excited for Jack, and I'm excited for myself because we've had exposure, and you guys are the same. You've had exposure to a lot of people. You've learned a lot. I can give them so much more. We can sit in the car on a way back from a rugby game and go, how'd you play today? Talk to me. Like, what was good about what you did? But start to encourage those things from an early age. What did you enjoy about playing? I like scoring tries.
I think the reflection is such a big part. I mean, it's probably where actually all the gains are made, that it's so easy to discount, and you just go straight to the next thing, and it's like, you almost forget about it. I want to do the next thing. Yeah.
Particularly if it goes badly, you don't necessarily remember. I remember when I was very young, one of our coaches said to us, if you It's amazing. We're talking probably like 25 years ago. I can't remember anything else from that long ago. But he said, like, if we'd lost and everyone was being, packing us out about it, and he was like, if you lose and you don't learn anything from it, you've not lost by enough. And I thought that was
It makes me think of the process of mastery. There's a fantastic book by an author called Robert Greene, and he talks us through the stages of mastery. And there's apprenticeship, and there's apprenticeship where you're doing practice, and then there's your own practice. And you watch any kung fu movie, and there's the absolute necessity of having a guru or a master to kind of learn from. But then I think at a certain point, that master then has to be able to take a step back and say, well, this is up to the individual to kind of express themselves however they want, and whether they want to kind of burn out or throw it all away, or whether they want to go on to their greatest potential. But it's up to the individual to make that decision. I think it's a really critical part. It's really critical on the opposite side to have that master to be able to question and encourage the reflection and encourage the growth, because they've been through the process. They know the process. They know where to push the buttons to sort of say, well, how did you defend there? You keep making this mistake over and over again that you can't see in that moment. Of course you can't. Especially when you're young, you're too emotional. But the master can, sort of thing. So I think it's just such a fine line with it all.
Yeah, I think you need both, like you said. The discipline of structure.
If generalism was going to cover everything, then within that needs to be some specialism.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's missing specialism. And I think you're probably more potentially. Is there more likely to be? When you said about Bruce Lee before, there's a guy who was I'm going to forget. It's Josh Waltzkin. Is that right? He'd been world chess champion, and then learned, and then just took the process of how did I become the best at this, and then applied it to, and then went and won like a kung fu championship or something like that. Didn't just but applying there's a process, there's some steps I can go through that I can just apply to different things.
Yeah.
Does potentially a specialist approach encourage us to figure that out, and then we can apply it in then different areas, and then we're able to.
But when you see the generalists, they're not structureless. Like generalism doesn't mean just do whatever I like today. They're still I want to be able to do a handstand and this and that and the other. There's still the discipline. I think that's when you understand discipline and turning up and process and scaling and regression and progression, combined then with who you are as a person. So I have a natural flair for that, and you marry the two. That's where potential seemed for me, having this conversation. That's where potential is, rather than if you follow a structure and you're physically able, you'll become you could pick up most sports, I could pick up most sports, and you get I can kind of do that, but I don't enjoy it, so I never progress it past the point where other people are like, what? Why is that person so good at that? Because they're not as able as me, but they're just turning up, following the process, and they just have this scientific, mathematical brain, which is I might just turn up every day and just work at 55% overtime, rather than just going to once a week, 105%, knackered for the rest of the week, but smashed it. Yeah. They'll just overtake you by a country mile, and you're like, but you're running at half the speed. Yeah, half the speed every day. It's the real structure and real discipline to that. And often, I think maybe 4 and below, they don't have as much creativity as those people to express that bit, and that's the nuance that then takes you into your potential. And I think it's finding those parts where you can be at the top of the slope and go, cool, you did that.
Gonna go big.
Yeah. It's because I can,
line.
And you have that ability to dip in, because the structure and the discipline has given you an amazing foundation to go, I don't have to think about any of all of that stuff. It's just taken care of. And in that moment, that's when I turn. You don't even turn it on. It's just there. And if I land it, amazing.
Well, we've been talking a bit. We did our coaching calisthenics seminar a couple of weeks ago. We've talked around reductionism and how science and a lot of practice has taken us down this route of assuming that major things have a major impact and minor things have a minor impact. So we want to try and break things down to small little segments that our small human brain can understand, and it takes it out of a systems approach. There's a couple of books I've been reading and some stuff that's buzzing around in my head around it, and this idea that so we're talking very much potential around the physical, but then if we put that into a complex system, we've also now got the mindset and the fear of failure. So yes, you may have the physical ability to go bigger on a half pipe trick to win the competition, but are you afraid of failure? What happens if you crash? So do you then at that point decide to play it safe? And now it's a mindset thing, but you only get that potentially if you are in a slightly competitive environment. That's what's going to bring out the best in most people. Some people might be able to turn it on, but if you're riding with your mates and someone's gone big, there's no structured competition, no gold medal on the line. Okay, you're riding with your mates, you might still go big, but only because somebody went and did it before. If that was you going down the mountain first, like,
unless you're in an environment, and we were talking about this today on the train, like only being around people that everyone's almost calling each other out. And a friend of ours, Jess, who was a skater, he was in, like years ago, he was in San Francisco, and he said, I'd never met this kind of, and they turned out to then all be like that generation. They were just all ruthless on each other. They were all really tight, but they were like, that was shit, you can do that better. And Jess was like, don't say that to me, like this English way. And they were just all riding so hard. At the end of the session, they were just back to normal, but there was just that, they were just climbing the whole time, and whether there was an aggression there, but they were just pushing themselves. There was that competition, but it was healthy.
The question was like, who are the people that I'm surrounding myself with, like how are they inspiring me, good and bad? Like if they're inspiring me to just do shit things or things that are not progressing me, then why are they in my life? And if they're inspiring me to do great things, which could be competitive, because your friends kind of just pulled out the latest, greatest trick, and in that blind flash of the moment, you're inspired to try something else, then they're the people that you should be around. The prime example that comes to mind of that is Deuce Gym in LA that we talk about all the time. Yeah. Because it's just, that's the environment. They've been so good.
Ultra supportive.
They've been so good in curating a culture and environment in which everyone's ultra supportive, everyone's pushing you, everyone's calling you out if you're being slack, and you see it in the clientele, you see it in the trainers. It comes from a culture from top down in respect of Logan's kind of intentionally created that culture, and it's like that's the people that you want to be around, right? The people that are gonna inspire that. And there's kind of competition, but it's friendly type of competition in the sense of what Yummie was saying of like, okay, well, this person has done that and they've shared it with me, so now I can try and do this. I'm going to share it back with them. There's a common theme, right, of everyone progressing and everyone getting as good as they can be. And of course, within that, one person's going to be better because that's just, that's the way it goes.
It makes me want to ask the question, like, why do we want to try and push everything so far? And it's maybe not necessarily an answer for that.
I know the answer. We put the quote in one of our ebooks, and it's a Walt Disney quote, and I can't remember it verbatim, but essentially what you're saying is we keep pushing forwards because we're curious. And I think that's what it is for me. Is like, for us in calisthenics, you do one thing, you're like, I wonder if I can do that. That's enjoyment. I've got satisfaction out of it. Can I do that next thing? And that's for me even snowboarding as well, like, or any of that sort of that environment of going, well, if I could do that, then I wonder if I could do this thing. But I also think that comes from a place of being naturally ambitious, optimistic, wanting to push forward and drive and see what are your limits. And I don't think we do it because we have a maturity at our age of looking back and going, well, it's good to push your limits. But when you're a kid, you're not really kind of conscious of that. You're just trying to see what is possible.
But why are we so curious?
It's a beautiful thing, right?
I think that's I'm being human, isn't it? I think we haven't. We know we have a huge amount of potential, and I think we
know we're not actually there.
We just want to, and I think that goes for anyone. I really think that's for anyone, whether they move or not, but they're curious about, I could, because it's kind of your brain starts to fire, doesn't it? When you do something different, it might be I don't know, you're super into maths and you get like this equation right, and you're like, that was sick. If that can ever be sick. But
hey, everyone, check out my
equation. But and then you try it again, and I think that's being human. I think we have.
I think there's a a lot of Tim sort of for one of our podcasts recently. We interviewed each other, and on his he asked me a couple of questions that made me like properly stop and think. And I don't like. I agree with what you're saying, but I think there's so many people out there that don't. Life just and everything becomes so busy, and there's so much. There's some quote recently about the amount of information in one day that we receive is like more than the last 50 years or something.
Yeah.
What it is, I don't know. You might know what it's.
And it's huge.
something like that.
It's decades and decades.
And so we
isn't it?
don't actually like stop. We don't actually like even consider like, why don't I like my job?
Yeah.
I just literally wake up and go, I hate my job.
Yeah.
So that goes back.
What's
That
behind
goes back
it?
to reflection, though.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Exactly.
know, of like, okay, so what's actually important? Because you're right. It pretty quickly. You know, people are always saying, "Oh my god, this year went so fast." No, it went exactly the same. Every other fucking year on record. But it's
the leap year where it was whatever.
Let's not get caught in detail.
But you know, because you filled your year full of shit. You know, so what actually is really important? I think that's probably actually a perfect example of when someone does achieve mastery, because they just cut out all the noise, all the nonsense, and they're fully focused on what it is that they do. You know?
Yeah. So another thing we've been talking about from a book that I'm reading is the willpower versus desire. And I've had a huge amount of willpower. So it was been so strong that it injured my shoulders, it burnt me out, it took me to a really dark place. And I think that's where a lot of people think that's what willpower is. It's just, I'm going to push through at all costs. I think it's really interesting. Nike is just do it. And I was thinking brackets at all costs, because actually there are two different things. And this chapter in the book talked about, we've got willpower, we've switched it around in our mind. Willpower isn't the ability to push through at all costs. Willpower is the ability to protect doing what you love from outside influences trying to derail you. Yeah. And you're like, yeah. And then doing what you love, when the desire is so strong, you don't really need the willpower to stop you doing those things, because you're just like, I'm so focused on the thing that I love. So it's finding that thing that allows you to reach your potential. And willpower just is there as a backup, which allows you to, like, you know, it's like, oh wow, we were saying, you know, 3 girls have asked me out tonight. It's like, no, because if I go out, I can't go climbing tomorrow, and that's what I love doing. I'll see you afterwards. But we kind of go, no, I want it all, and I'm going to push through, and it's a badge of honor to be tired. It's a badge of honor to be, you know, broken. It's a badge of honor to be busy, to be all of this. It's like, I don't want to be busy. I think when people say they're busy, it's bullshit. I really do. It's
inefficient.
I don't think it's even inefficiency.
Inefficient
I think it's just bullshit. No one's busy, because if you really want to do something, you will make it happen.
A friend of mine who works in leadership now, he once said to me, he asked me, we were just chatting, and he says, how are you? I said, mate, I'm busy. And he just turned around and quipped. This was a couple of years ago. He goes, business is a state of mind. But then later that year, we went and climbed the 3 peaks, and he's not fit. Like, at the time he wasn't. So we're walking up, and he wants to give it a go, and we're walking together halfway up Scaffold Pike. And I went, mate, how you getting on? He goes, mate, I'm tired. And I went, tiredness is a state of mind. That's like right back at you. But you're right, in that I think there's a few people I've spoken to this week actually said, how's things going? It looks great. I'm like, yeah, mate, and I've intentionally tried to say, or not say, I'm busy. I said, we've got a lot on. Like, especially when you start thinking, we talked about generalism, but we're also now talking about building a business. Let's not even talk about running a business, like building a business and running a business, being a dad, trying to be a husband, trying to have a social life. Like that, those things then start to become, you can't be all in on one of them if you want to have some function. And the other thing you mentioned about for you, burnout, Brett Bartholomew is a guy that we had on the podcast a while ago. He put something up on social which really resonated with me, because I've been close to burnout before. I don't think I've actually kind of gone over the edge, but there's a few occasions where I've been like properly redline. And he said that you can only, I'm going to paraphrase, but you can only burn out if you've put so much into something. You've put everything in, emotionally very invested in the process, and you've gotten to a point where you realise that it's not yielded the results that you expected. That's when you burn out, that you've gone all in and it hasn't manifested itself. But then that gives you context, because now you're in a point where you've been so close, you now have a relevant or a more accurate perspective of willpower and desire and how to sort of balance those things out. And I think, again, it's like, you've almost sometimes got to go too far to know where the limits are. And that could be that your shoulder breaks down if it's calisthenics, or you find your sporting potential where pushing a little bit further to get an extra 5 kilos on the bar is actually the law of diminishing returns. It's not really worth it.
Yeah.
And the same thing happens in life. We push so hard with business that it takes up all of my time. I'm busy. I'm burning out. And then you go, do you know what? Actually, I'm really missing out on being present when I'm at home because I'm on Instagram instead of sat with Jack building blocks, which arguably, like, what's more important?
Yeah.
I think
knocked those blocks down when I built a very.
He's aggressive with them, isn't he?
I think language is really important here too, because busyness to me reflects something negative. Like, I'm really busy. Like, it's never said, like, yeah, I'm really busy. It's always like, yeah, I'm really fucking busy. I'm exhausted. But last year we were talking about this, and I think we used the phrases like, yeah, I've been choosing to spend my time, working on this. Yeah, there's an intention behind what it is that you want to do.
It's also like, relative, isn't it? It's like, to what? I said this to you the other day. We were talking about being busy, and I went, to be fair though, like when we met Ross Edgley, and he'd like driven through the night from, he'd been with the SAS or but whatever, and I've said to Tim, I was like, we do quite a lot, and this, that, the other, but we've never had like 2 hours sleep and been driving through the middle of the night to go and meet someone else to do another podcast. Like, it's relative to what we were before.
We're also not sponsored by Red Bull.
yes.
That's Ross is. Which means that you can do more.
I just think, that relativeness of like, when we sort of say, we potentially, just talking about language, potentially just, we get used to just saying things, and actually you're not actually thinking, you're not stopping and going, how do I actually feel today? I feel always busy, so I'm just going to say busy.
I think it's really interesting, Chris, when you mention that, because with being self-employed and running a business, people say, how's it going? I'm really busy. They go, that's good, isn't it? And I'm going, not really. Like, it's really hard.
We also related to something I used to wrestle with when I was playing like professional rugby, in that I liked it, or I loved it, and there was certain, like any job, there's certain bits of it that are great. There's Tuesday afternoons in the pissing rain, and there's some massive bloke just wants to smash you. You're like, I'd happily be stacking shells at Aldi. Like, brilliant. But
just that moment before impact, like that scene in the movie, it's like this flash. Shelves.
Yeah, just going boom.
Jam.
Yeah. Quick cut back to like sort of your face in slow motion, being like, whoa.
So do you know what I mean? There's always things that we don't. Yeah, that are good. You take the good with the bad, but like the feeling of like we are what we do rather than like we are who we are was something we've done some like used to do some performance mindset work with some of the Paralympic athletes we were working with, and what happens if you're in a sport, unless it's snooker or golf, you're not going to do it forever. Like, you're going to retire around about 30 something, and so you can't be the footballer forever. So what are you going to do when you finish? And it was what was James Clancy, he was in the Marines, and he's gone into, he said he came out, and for 2 years he thought he was going to get a job just in the city working in the bank or whatever, and he just couldn't do it. And he had 2 years of getting out of the military where he just went AWOL and couldn't manage the change, and because our that identity is in the thing that you were doing. And so often, when we're talking now, like when someone asks you how you're doing, particularly when you're self-employed, but even if you're not self-employed, it tends to be like basically how work is. And like when someone goes, you meet someone for the first time, the question is like, what's your name? And then what do you do?
I don't even bother with the name, I just go, what you do?
Yeah, exactly. Comes that second. I used to hate.
You're going to forget your name anyways.
I used to hate. I really used to hate. I don't know why. It became a bit of a thing that I then like hated, and then it was like you meet. So I'd like then not want to meet because like, I don't want to have this conversation.
Yeah, quite. I never know when someone says that how we answer that, and you just go, and it's just like, I'd rather say, do you want to go in the sea?
There was something that made me. We're talking about reflection. There was something that, as ever we were talking through everything so far, that was making me reflect on something for myself from a sporting background with the generalist, the specialist. That one thing that that missed in the conversation potentially. You said a little bit about the guys pushing each other in what
skating,
skating.
skateboarding, yeah.
But there weren't the difference between like the team dynamic. And I used to get asked, like, what do you miss? What do you miss playing rugby? Like, or what do you miss? And I used to be quite sort of dismissive about it because I don't know. I think mentally I used to think that if you missed it, then it's a negative thing or whatever. But the thing that I reflecting on literally as we're talking, that none of those other movement, this, that, none of those things that we talked about, or every sport that's been mentioned so far, doesn't have that element of, and the element of competition within a team that I do miss that there's a day and a time where the whistle's going to go and it's just a game. It doesn't matter. But for the next 80 minutes, those 15 blokes over there are going to try and batter us. And like, we've got to, like, there's a competitiveness. You don't know what's going to happen. That I don't have in, like, that's something that I haven't found elsewhere since finishing doing a sport.
I think it's sorry to interrupt. I think it's a really important element. I think if you I'm totally going off the cuff here and just popped into my mind. I think if you go back to indigenous tribes, you see that a lot with I wanted to call it war games, with the young warriors, because you can't go to war all the time.
Yeah.
So to dispel that energy and to dispel that adrenaline, it's like you have to have these competitive pursuits in whatever shape or form they are, in order to kind of get that out and let that be expressed, so it doesn't become chaotic and it doesn't become unruly. I think it's just a really important thing. I think it probably becomes a problem when people forget that it ends at 90 minutes or whatever the thing is, and it goes on and on and on. It's like, no, this is just a 60-minute thing, and it's like no one wins anything at the end. It's just a way to have especially for people with a lot of testosterone, basically, clashing of heads and so on and so forth. Yeah, and when
if I think, like, the funny thing about it, me saying it now is, during it, most of the time I was petrified, or it was like, do you know what I mean? It was like you're getting. But I used to enjoy the challenge of, like, trying to get psyched up and, like, but not too psyched up, but then being able to do it, and the idea of, obviously, you say now, like, I think I miss it. But if you said I had to go and get to that level tomorrow, like, it's exhausting, just the mental side.
Yeah,
and
maybe you do it in a different way.
Yeah,
like, I think
to that intensity.
It's really important to do things. I mean, I wouldn't have gone climbing unless it was us four. Like, having that, I have no interest in climbing on my own anymore, or training on my own. It's only because then you can share it, and it's like it feels like a team. And I guess my sports have always been individual, but you then trust your life to someone holding your rope, which is a pretty intense team. Same in, you're hoping that your mate's gonna fucking stop that massive train coming at me because I've got the ball, and and when you have that connection, you don't even have to worry because he's just taking him out, and you've been able. And I think we just need that. So it's interesting with apps and fitness and apps, and it's like it's isolating too many people, and actually it's about bringing people together. And I guarantee if you're with meeting those people every, or twice a week, your performance will just get better.
One of the things we love about calisthenics, that guaranteed I could go into a gym, and if I'm doing a handstand or trying to do a handstand, and there's someone else there that's also, we'll end up talking. But my wife works at Nuffield, and I go to the gym up there sometimes, and it's not that, it's all like, everyone's headphones on, don't talk to anybody on the weights machine, and like, it makes
dehumanized
me sad. But literally, I get sad, like, watching it, going like, why? And I'm not that outwardly going enough to go, come on guys, let's have a come and do handstands over here. But it's just, I'm literally watching you going like, why are you doing that? And like, exercise is good. It's like a nice sunny day, go and do some, but
probably goes to explain why those fitness environments don't really get you fit.
Gyms don't work.
I think I can see that, like, going,
Hence the rise in
Going
CrossFit
around-
and all of that
Yeah,
stuff.
how
It's
long
It's
are they
like
like,
the
gonna-
rise in communities, right?
Yeah,
With Charlie
exactly.
and Run Them Crew or CrossFit or even in
Parkrun,
London.
like-
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You know, people want to be together because
Yeah.
you know, that's how we're supposed to be.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
That's you know the
So
genetics. I
the
suppose.
big gym chains could.
well, I think
Go.
they're
just not
they're being
inspiring, are they,
challenged,
you know?
aren't they? They're being
Yeah.
challenged by, you know, the
Boutique
smaller
fitness,
boutique
yeah, yeah.
fitness gyms, which are then being challenged by, because we go, "Oh, we
Even-
just want a gym. We want to like buy a garage and turn it
Mm.
into our own gym, only for people who kind of want to come down. It's like that's
That's what I was saying about Mike's gym in Marbella. That's how his started.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Men's Health described it as the best gym in the world. He started by he bought a shed to put his jet skis in that in the winter, and then during the winter they needed somewhere to train, so he put a couple of pull-up bars in this like shed that had the jet skis in. And then a few of his mates came, and then literally, like we recorded a podcast with him. He tells the story of like how it's like this enormous. It's
You
absolutely
boys need to get on the Mike's
mental.
gym trip.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
expensive.
yeah,
Come
definitely.
with us. It's
And
so good.
It's the beautiful thing about his place is that he did exactly what you just said. He just built something for him, and he's very brash about that. He's like, I built this for me. I'm gonna. He's like, I'll beat anybody on that course because I designed it for me. Like, if you want
Yeah.
to come along, great. But it's not. I haven't bought it for you. But he's,
We running around the obstacle course, and there's like a big concrete like barrel or something in the dirt, and one of the girls runs around it. And I won't use his language, but he's like, "Get back over it! Put it 4 days to take to put that in there. You get back over there and run over it." Like, there's blood, sweat, and tears in that
I
course.
think that's how great things are made when you
Yeah.
don't pander. Like
Scratching your own
when
itch
your
is-
vision to anyone else, you're like, I'm doing this for me,
Mm.
and then people are like, oh yeah, that's inspiring, or oh, I want to be involved in it. You know, like Charlie with Run Them Crew. You know, just going out on the streets, running on his own, and then all of a sudden it becomes a movement with 300 people. You know, because you're just doing what you want to do.
Yeah.
We've experienced that. Calisthenics for us at School of Calisthenics started as that. It was Jack and I messing about in the gym because it was fun. And then we had no intentions of teaching to start off with. We were just doing it because we thought we might learn something. It was a different form of training. We thought it was cool, different challenge, and we got hooked on it. And we were awful. And then everybody...
There's nowhere in the gym to do it.
No,
we were just
yeah.
sort of like in between machines and whatnot. And
yeah.
There was a pole dancing pole, that was it.
yeah.
Perfect flags.
Yeah, well, that's where we learned to flag. There's a girl who used to teach pole on.
Oh, yeah, it was in the
Saturday
gym.
afternoon.
Have you finished dancing on that?
We'll get off that now. Just let the big boys have a
Put your
go.
panties back on, Tim.
But then,
You still got your high heels.
yeah, I have, yeah. But then...
It's hard though, pole apparently, isn't
Yes,
it?
they're super strong.
Yeah.
Like some of the stuff that they would do, we were like close. But we got to a point where we got okay, and then people were like, you know, if you guys like want to teach us, like, I'd like to learn to do that. I'll come to workshops. So we went, oh, let's put a workshop on. And then we came down and we saw you guys in pool, and all of a sudden we were like, you know what? Let's just put some stuff out. And a lot of it came from us wanting to just to share the enjoyment that we'd had, because we found calisthenics was so difficult to get into. And we had some unique experience of training Paralympic athletes. It meant that we saw the training environment a little bit differently. So you can't show me a textbook that shows you how to get a double leg amputee to run a 2-hour 40 marathon, but I know how to do that because I trained a guy. So we just started applying that into what we were doing with calisthenics and made it accessible to literally anybody who can walk in the door and we'll go, I've got the exercise for you, because I'm not constrained by this environment of 3 sets of 10 and these are the bench, squat and deadlift. And I think that's one thing that we've, it started so organically, and it started with us sharing a passion. Other people have cottoned onto it and gone, I get really excited about that too. And I want to be part
abs
of
help.
something. Abs help, apparently.
That's why you've always got your tops off.
But we put community at like it's the forefront of what we do. Like before we saw you guys today, we recorded a graduate celebration. So the end of every month, we take people who've sent us videos on Instagram,
Amazing.
of them doing something for the first time. We sit down and we just give some running commentary on it, but showcasing that other people are out there doing something awesome. And I think that's the inspiration point of going, I don't think there's many people in our community that want to be better than me. No one's ever said that to me, like, oh, you've done that, I'm going to get you. They're always just like, that's amazing, I'm working on X, Y, and Z. So it's not a competitive environment, but there's a source of inspiration for them to be more. And I think that goes back to a point we were talking about before, about the people that you surround yourself with. And community is important, but we live in a society which is disconnected. People don't know who they are living next door to, that they sleep 5 meters or less away from, but people are connecting on social, and that's one of the real good things about social, is we can reach out and we can have impact with people who otherwise would have absolutely no way of connecting with. We had a guy came into the gym, was driving down from Harrogate as a drummer on his way back home in London, and dropped into the gym, and we just, like, you'd done a session with him, I was on the way past.
Great.
But it's that human connection that and we're using social to facilitate that. Like, we're doing a Tough Mudder event. Just come along. If you want to come and hang out with us for the day, we're going to do it. Let's meet face to face. And there's some people that have been with us from the start. You ask them what's great about School of Calisthenics? Community. That's the best thing. It's not whether I can do a flipping planche or not.
Yeah. We stumbled across that. The whole thing's just like growing organically from, as you said, like us just messing about. We had this handstand world record attempt that we tried to. The record, I think, is something like 398 people doing a handstand at the same time
For 15 seconds. Which is no mean feat.
Which we tried to beat last year. We're still waiting for Guinness World Records to come back with the clarification whether we did or not. But at the end of that day, there was like, we were just astounded by the people that had come. Like, people, it was someone from Belgium, someone from South Africa, someone from Norway, and it was just like where people had come from. And some of them, we were like, how's your 15-second handstand going? They were like, no chance. And we're like, well, how come I just wanted to come and be part of this thing. And we did a couple of interviews with some of the people that had come afterwards, and just asking them some questions about, like, you know, why calisthenics, and what do they like about it? And what they were saying, like, really just brought. I said to Tim afterwards, like, something has happened here that, like, we were completely unaware was happening. We just thought we were teaching some people to do a handstand, and actually it's far bigger than that. And it is, and that community aspect has risen on its own to just be like the biggest thing, and it's probably the thing I'm most proud of, if that's the right word. Even though we don't actually, it's everybody else. It's nothing to do with us.
If we set out to create a community, it would have been completely different. The beauty of it, that it was completely organic, and I think that comes from people seeing passion, and that's infectious. Enthusiasm is infectious, and inspiring people and freeing people to think, you've made it okay for me to be a bit crap because you're a bit crap.
Yeah.
So I'm also just going to get involved and see what I can do, and then we go back all the stuff that we talked about.
Just for the record, Sarah, my
Next
door
door
neighbour, works for Trial Finders. She's in America or something because she has to go on these trips, so she can tell people about them. Amazing job. So I've done the Inca Trail, work paid for it. I want her job.
Good aside.
Is this what you were about to split up?
Yeah.
Sorry, boys, I got
School,
a job.
holiday.
Yeah, school's out. Yeah, community is you can't manufacture it.
You guys have got a great opportunity to do something cool, like to talk about what you guys have got coming up, because you've actually spent a lot of time and effort in terms of going out there and connecting. And I think that's the one thing when you're talking at the beginning, James, that I'm really envious that you guys have had the opportunity to do, is to go out and get exposure to so many people, so many different ideas.
Diverse, yeah.
So cool. And what I'm excited about for you guys now and for weMove is what you do with that. Because you're not just going to sit on and go, we are some pretty smart dudes now. Like, we've got loads of stuff and my life's amazing because I'm going to implement it all. Like, you guys are now going to go out and share that with others.
No, I've got to tell you though, it's tempting just to keep going. Because it's so much fucking fun.
Well, I think we see ourselves as, we're kind of explorers, and like modern day explorers. Like, you've got like Ross Edgley doing his stuff, and we're kind of, we just go out and we're like, we've no idea. We're totally out of our depth with, you know, induced gym. It's like, who are the two skinny white English guys?
That's where generalisation works really well. I can do that. I can't do it as well as you, but I can do it.
But we'll turn up and go, okay, cool.
How have you not heard our podcast?
And then,
magazine around us.
but I think just going out there, I think that's kind of what we've done. And then, so we love being explorers because it's amazing. It's then when we come back and like, how do you bring all of those people together?
That's the great thing. You're facilitating bringing all that stuff, because all of the stuff that you're bringing together is not going to come together on its own. It needs someone to facilitate that going through.
Yeah.
And something you said right at the beginning about that you're not going with an ego or going to these people to you don't want to have a conversation with Wim Hof because you want to tell him what you know about how to.
You don't want to do it like that.
Do you know what I mean? It's like totally not. It's like tell us so that we can like then go and share this with more people and try and join some of these dots up together. And I think that's the beauty of it. That's where it then has real impact for people, because rather than you having to, as a a consumer of your stuff, rather than me having to go and speak to research that person and that person and that person, you're actually just bringing it all together. And the
complete human experience. Yeah. So that's what we're working on next, which is a 3-day. The complete human. I am the complete human experience. I have told people that.
What do you do?
That's a good title.
I don't say what I do. I say this is who I am. I am the complete human experience.
You talk about yourself in the third person like that would be good.
Well, we were working out kind of what we do, because we can't. Oh gosh, we should put like a calisthenics workshop out. It's like, well, it's really disingenuous to us, but we know these people, and we know that, say, breath work and calisthenics, they don't really come together apart from a few people. So can we bring them together? And we also realised that the magazine's been a great calling card. The podcast is the future of that kind of media, and because there are so many great people that we're seeing. But how do you start to how do you start to positively affect change for other people? You read all the stuff you like, you've got to experience it. You can have, I've got the handstand ebook, doesn't mean I can do the handstand, but I've got all the ebooks.
What?
I've got all the ebooks.
Couldn't quite work out the picture.
But we're before you carry on, we're in a stage of technology and I'm going to use the word society again, where we just consume. Our job is, or our mindset is, get an Audible subscription. It's one book a month. Just flipping like consume content. And the point of actually being able to do something with it, I think for you guys, is then really interesting to go. You need to actually bring it to life, because unless you do something about the last business book or I've got a breathwork book. Do I do breathwork? No, because I'm reading a different book now about teams. So now it's about teams. I should be doing breathwork.
You've been reading the whole time we've been here.
Badly. From my upper ribcage, Dave. Not diaphragmatic.
Sorry. Yeah. So that was shush. Trying to finish. To bring it together, because we're not going to create another printed magazine, because we feel the life's messages we've done in those two, then it would just be regurgitating for the sake of making another magazine.
You can only write one article on breath,
which is
and out.
Some magazines do that every month.
I know, and it just seemed really disingenuous.
Abs.
But we found that on the last trip to the States, we were driving along, and I was like, maybe we shouldn't do another magazine. But then you're like, whoa, we're in no man's land, because we're weMove magazine.
Yeah, exactly.
So that, what do you define yourself as? It's like, well, we're not that anymore. We're, where are we going? And I think we were talking about this today, like, what are we? I think
let us know.
Let us know.
What do you want us to be?
I think we're so many things, because we cover so many topics. Like, and we say it's health, movement, and adventure. The adventure is your experience of going out into the world and experiencing whatever you want to do at the time. But how do you then bring people together in a really short space of time? Just download, and it will be an intense 3 days. So the complete human experience is a 3-day residential experience. It's going to go from the 26th of September to the 29th of September. You'll arrive on a Thursday night, you'll leave on a Sunday night, and it will be intense. It's being curated by one of our mentors.
Intense?
It'll be intense, SE, and you will actually be sleeping in tents.
Is it in a tent?
Yeah.
Oh,
well, everyone's going to sleep in their own tent, because we're working with a sleep expert, so you can experience what it is to have
oxygen.
No. It's way more simple than that, and it's about connecting with certain things. But it will kind of knock you out of time and space. It will put you into flow. You'll go from comfort zone to growth zone. You'll be with some of the best, world's innovators in running, strength training, breath, mindfulness, integration, reflection. You kind of won't know what's happened to you in those 3 days. But my personal belief is, I guarantee you'll be better at what your chosen pursuit is than when you came in, because you can't not improve when you're around 70 like-minded people, or like putting you there. You'll be having experiences from cold immersion in the you know, in the Atlantic Ocean, going, shit, am I even gonna like come back for this? But you know, your buddy is looking after you, and one of the curators is ex-Special Forces, you know, US Special Forces. So he's kind of curating that side of it. And I think it'll be amazing. And it's like, I know people who come and they're like big, you know, they're like CrossFit dudes. I shouldn't say guarantee, but I'm like, I know you will lift better. I know you'll perform better. And you're probably not going to do any of the things that you think you should be doing. But I know your ability to express your body in the world post will be like, you won't have the same connection with fear or being scared. So your central nervous system will open up and you'll be like, I think it will be really profound. I'm expecting everyone, including us, to go through quite an emotional, you know, you'll go through that dark point to kind of be rebirthed. But it's all the experiences we've had in the 3 years that we've done, and we're going to package that into like a 3-day. We're totally excited about it because it's like, oh, we can do this, and you can experience that person, and then go from that to that. And yeah, this idea of, oh, I'm super busy, I think it will just go, this is what you do. You wake up, you get into an ice bath. You know, if you can't do an ice bath, you have a cold shower, and you're like, I never do that. And then at the end of the 3 days, you'll probably be doing it all the time. And that will have an effect on that. So yeah, it's kind of where we're going is, how can you bring those people together? Because people shouldn't be being ill, they shouldn't be burning out. But go up to your line, cross over occasionally. But if you're going to cross over, be around people that can bring you back in, so you can reflect on it, and then you can go, oh, actually, I don't need to go there again. I've done it. I know what that looks like. I know how that feels. I can process the two together. Yeah. I think it's like elite level training.
You said you've been there at burnout, and therefore, as Tim said before, that because if you hadn't have been there, you wouldn't be able to. Although it wasn't nice when you were there, but now you have that to reflect from, and it's relative. You can talk relative to, actually, I know what that endpoint is, and you wouldn't be able to do that if you hadn't have been through that experience yourself.
And I think it's really interesting that you guys have been through similar things. You know, with your shoulders like just totally blowing up. It's a burnout it's not like necessarily a mental burnout, but it's a physical one. You're like, whoa, I have limitations. It's really healthy to know where your limitations are, because you can start to adapt and find new ways through, rather than just expressing willpower. And the guy opposite me will just be bigger, and I will not go through him, you know. But if you've got it, you can go around the side of him or through his legs.
Ron said on this last trip in America, Ron Kalk, the climber we were talking about earlier on, he was talking about free solo, actually, and he was sort of saying it's amazing to be able to do these feats, but what is it that you're bringing back for the people? Like what is it that experience is giving you that you bring back for people, so they don't have to go and free solo El Capitan, because they never will be able to, you know. So what is it that you've learned about that to be able to give back to other people? And I kind of feel that's almost a great way to express what we've experienced over the past 4 years of going out and meeting all these different people and connecting the dots, and then, you know, what have we learned from them that we can bring back? So, you know, you don't have to go and spend 4 years traveling around, because you probably aren't going to spend 4 years traveling around meeting all these people. And it's like, okay, well, this bit from that person, you know, meets this bit from that person, meets this bit from that person. This creates this like perfect experience where this is going to happen as a result, and that's what will happen, basically.
Yeah, and I think the nature, because it's 70 people over 3 days, they can be small groups, and we're kind of aiming at running, yoga, CrossFit, and jiu-jitsu. But when you think of it, it's only 17.5 people from each. Yeah. It's not that many. So who those people are they're all curious and committed to furthering their own practice, which isn't everyone in a CrossFit box. You're kind of picking these ones that other people look to, and then you start to have this effect of, oh, well, why is Swanee doing this like breathing stuff before his workout, and he's never like, I'm going to do. We can't go in there and go, everyone should be breathing, because they're like, who are you? You know, what's your back squat? 90? Well, whatever. You know, but when the big guy's doing it, yeah,
barefoot,
when the big guy's doing it, they're like, oh, that rubs off, and it's trying to find the way through always that you can just start to connect all those things. And
I think it sounds
Yeah.
great. I think it's real. I'm really excited for you guys with it because I think it's for anybody who enjoys that and has some. Like I listen to the event and it doesn't scare me, like things like that, because it's gonna go. You're gonna go. I'm gonna push you outside your comfort zone, okay? Because it forms full circle. And I think this is where the real value of what you're saying is going to be for people. If you've had those experiences, you learn that you come back from it and you reflect on it and you actually start to seek it. It's like running. Like you go out there, you absolutely gas it. Like, okay, it's flipping horrible at the time. And I remember one time when I was a scuba diving instructor, I was doing my training. We were in the Sydney harbour. The weather was too bad to be outside on the main out the head of the harbour. So we were in a flipping hole in 35 metres, 0 viz, and I lost my head on the way back up. I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, we shouldn't have been down there, like, but we had to get a deep dive done that day. But you come back and you're back on the boat, and after a bit you're like, oh, I just completely overreacted. It was fine. But you don't know that till you've been there. Yeah. And then you start to seek those opportunities. And I think being mindful and being proactive about putting yourselves in those situations and actually creating time and space in your life just not to continue doing what you've always done is the most important thing that people can do, because you have to afford yourself an opportunity to grow. Otherwise, you'll just do what you've always done and you follow the path of least resistance. So I think it sounds great.
Yeah, I think the interesting part for us when we've been designing it is because everyone wants to ground it in their practice. So that's actually, there's loads of opportunity for you to do the thing that you do. But we're calling those like the integration period. So you're going to learn this stuff, you can reflect on it, and then integrate it into what you do. And how do you feel after you've been shit scared in the sea? Then see what you're lifting, and then reflect on that, of how these things have impacted on that. So you can kind of take that and go, oh wow, that's. But then if you apply what I've learned about the breathing and down regulating, I can control that fear to go into what I love to do, and I'm all right. And lots of things don't integrate. That's what, and I think this generalization, specialization, the integration's not there. So jiu-jitsu and rugby just like makes total sense. It's like I'm on my back, someone's trying to like wipe me out.
Armbar.
I can deal with it. You just don't freak out because you're like, cool, I'm on my back. Sooner or later, I can stay calm. I can down regulate. You back up rather than tense up. Neck's just gone because you fight or flight. So I think that reflection, integration practice is kind of what we're most excited about. That's what it'll give people. And then if you can take that out, I think we don't know.
Sounds great.
We're gonna have to wrap up because we got to catch a train.
Yes, we have.
Super cool to get to hang out.
And
nice.
chat about ourselves.
It's just good, like all around, just a round table conversation about movement and philosophy. And I think sometimes, like when we do podcasts, it's a big structure. We're going to try and get to a point, and we know there's certain points you want to bring out, but just let conversation flow. Like I've really enjoyed it. It's been really cool.
Yeah, it's been amazing.
Absolutely. Nice.
We'll do round 2 soon.
In Marbella.
In Marbella.
I'm totally up for it.
Well, actually, we're also doing the last thing we're doing in the lead up. We're going to the mountains every month. But end of May, if you want to come to the lakes with us, and we go out and we have this like 48 hours. We sleep on the mountain, like no tents, no nothing, just to kind of go into that kind of world. And we'll do some like lake swimming up high, but only 8 of us. So if you want to come to that,
nice. Give us a date.
The frog swim. Look up the frog swim.
The frog swim. Is that a thing?
Oh no.
Yeah. What was it called? Something like that.
Frog Bob Ground Round, something like that.
Oh, the Bob Graham?
But there's a frog Graham.
Yeah, there's a frog
you have
Graham,
to swim
that's
it. You have to
Frog
swim
Graham.
it.
Oh, no
Swim
way.
the 3 lakes.
We saw a short film about it at the weekend.
Chilly.
Yeah.
Cool.
Nice.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers, guys.
See ya.